The intro.
Absolutely. The floor is yours, Aaron. We're excited to hear this.
Perfect. So I appreciate the intro, Michael. I know that he kind of gave us the overview of what we're going to talk about today. So this is going to be a good amount of content. So I'm going to dive right into it. And if anybody wants the deck after it's done, I've done a lot of writing into it, so that way you can use it basically as a guide. So feel free to reach out to me, LinkedIn, email, whatever, and I can always send it your way. So, basic introduction, like you said, we work with early stage companies, typically Series A and below. We help them with everything business, financial, and capital raising related. So, we connect with people, we help them optimize their processes, define their business, and grow and scale. So, just that's really quick, so you know where this advice is coming from. This is very much professionally what we do. So this is if you have to leave this presentation in 3 minutes, this is what you should take away. This is the framework for a basic, generally accepted and useful pitch deck, and as well as the rationale for what you need to get out of each slide. So just very quickly, we're just going to do the kind of 1-2 punch, so everybody has a baseline for what needs to be in this presentation. The one-liner. So this is both for the presentation and for your pitching. 30-second pitches are great, 5-minute pitches are better, and all that good stuff. But what is the one thing you're going to say to someone when you bump into them? What's the one phrase you're going to say when you start your presentation to define who you are and what you do? We bring X value to Y people for Z purpose. We're solving this problem, etc. Problems. Is it real and is it painful? Pretty short and simple there. The solution. This one, pretty simple as well. Does the solution actually directly tie to the problem? A lot of solutions hover around, they float, but are you actually attacking the problem and the cause of the problem directly with your solution? Market size. Big thing here is don't exaggerate. Everybody likes to think that $1 billion number on the page is going to impress investors. The unfortunate reality is that it won't. Right? These are men and women that are professionals. They manage millions of dollars. The fact that you write $1 trillion on the page does very little for them. They want to see what you're doing with that market size. Do you have an accurate count? Do you know their locations? Do you know how to engage with them? Right? This is the type of market size you need. From there, you get down to your business model, which is how do you make money, right? Growth is not what it once was before. Growing is great, but monetizing is better. Traction, really no other word for it. Show me that you're growing, right? It's show me some traction. Something should be going up to the right. Competition, competitive advantage. Basically, what's your cheat code, right? What's your unfair advantage? It's going to let you beat the competition on every corner, at every race. Marketing plan. Basic here is it reasonable, and do you have some data, right? You could have a plan to launch X, Y, and Z strategy, but if you've done nothing towards any of those, how effectual is it really going to be? Your team, is it appropriate or balanced? And what that means is, are you either the right people to do it definitionally, or have you balanced the problems that you have, meaning there are certain areas or coverage marks, whether it's legal or industry or seniority, whatever it might be, that are going to allow you to get the business done? Have you checked those boxes on the team? And I can feel as the investor, oh, they have a full team that can actually build a business, right? I'm not working with a broken toy. And then the last two, pretty nice and easy: capital ask and use of proceeds. Make it simple and be specific, right? You're never going to be faulted for specificity as long as you don't, go down the rabbit hole on some deep tech stuff when you're talking to a consumer investor, right? And then last but not least, financials. Do your basics, have your 3 years, understand the difference between your revenues and your expenses, the drivers, and really what your ROI really means. So short and sweet, make sure you take, a screenshot of this and use this as a good reference. So I'm going to go through the rest of the slides pretty quickly, and then I'll answer, any Q&A. So if you have them, feel free to, put them in the chat or do whatever's easiest. I like to, give real answers on this and not just a bunch of webinar talk. So number one, your one-liner. What is it, right? This is the one thing you're going to say to me when you go to that weird networking event and you bump into somebody while you're reaching for a Diet Coke, right? What are you going to say that you do? Right? It's a very real scenario that you're going to find yourself in. You don't change the healthcare world for future generations of Americans, and you don't describe the minute detail of the scientific project. You're like, I help make compliance easier for healthcare organizations. I develop software that helps educations get their schoolwork more easily in front of their students. That's a real answer, because there's also real questions that can come from that. You're giving me the opportunity to dive in and get interested. Now, where does this come from and how do you build it? Everybody, I'm sure, has seen this. And if you haven't, I encourage you to Google it. There's about 100,000 YouTube videos that will walk you through this in every way, shape, and form. But the meat and potatoes is right in the middle, your value proposition. What value, to whom, for what? So I'll use one of our clients as an example. We are a behavioral healthcare company that creates operational compliance software for clinics and facilities that do treatment to improve their efficiencies over time. Right? There's a few words in there. You could cut the fat, you could do whatever, but there's no doubt what I do. You have no questions about that it's valuable, at least insofar as that it sounds valuable off the bat. Now all the unpacking and all that work can get started. Your problem. So basics for problem, it's not even so much that the problem exists, because generally we're going to assume that it exists, but it has to kind of check some boxes. And what are those boxes? Is it popular? Right? Do a lot of people know of this problem, or do they accept that this is a problem? Right? If there's only 10 people that think this is an issue, unless those 10 people are Microsoft, Apple, and Netflix, like, you're going to run into some big issues, right? And if those are the only people that are running into this problem, you probably should try and figure out where you fit in that value chain. For growing, is this problem on brand, right? On trend? Are things growing and moving in a positive trajectory for that market? Meaning, if you were doing CBD today, if you were doing cannabis today, if you were doing COVID today, right? These are all very much on brand, on market theme trends. Now, the good and the bad of this is it's good to be on trend, but it doesn't get you any points to be on trend. Meaning, when I hear trend as an investor, I hear price premium. I hear what cost me $1 yesterday now costs me $1.25 tomorrow. So you have to make sure that you find that balance and know that if you're on the trend, people are going to assume, yeah, you're going to get a higher valuation, but you're also going to be, from the investor side, paying a premium for that valuation, which you're not going to be, too enthused about. Expensive. This is a great one for, if it costs a company, 10% of their revenue every year and you can change it, that's a great thing to do, right? That's valuable. And when you look at, expensive, it can be expensive in a number of ways. It can be expensive because it's inconvenient. It can be expensive because it doesn't let them make enough money. It could be expensive because it impedes their ability to make, open up new revenue streams or expand into new geographies. Whatever it is that's, costing them, whether it's actual dollars or opportunity cost, make sure that it has an expense, and hopefully it's a big one, right? Now, the nice thing is you kind of get into the next category, which is a good checkbox, is mandatory or frequent, meaning, is this a legal regulation that's new that you get to lean into? Like, hey, clinics now need software. Okay, well, if I'm the only kid in the block selling software, I can make some good stuff and lean into it and have, dedicated demand. In the same way, if it's, frequent, meaning if somebody made a solution that prevented you from stubbing your toe, everybody in America would buy it because that happens to everybody, once a year, right? It's so frequent. It happens to so many people that you can imagine, okay, even if he only gets 10% of the market, that's a huge market to tackle. Going into your solution. So here's a few kind of considerations for the solution. It's less, finite that you have to do one or the other, much more, how are you going to answer these questions? So A, does it solve the problem directly, right? And this is very simple. If the problem is that organizations are very unorganized, right, then your solution better say something to the effect of, we help organize the compliance software or the compliance activities allowing this, right? It needs to directly connect. And it sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised how many pitches I've seen and been given and heard that at the first question that the audience asks is, okay, so just to be clear, you're a social media site that puts dogs are here. It's like, that's the bad way to start, right? Because you're not directly connecting the value, the solution, your product, your service, whatever you want to, define it as, to the problem you're solving. People are starting with a question in mind, which isn't, the best place that you want to be at. Is it the easiest and most rewarding way to solve? Meaning, people have a very, very, very low threshold, to actually do something, meaning it needs to really push high that they're going to get very happy. They're going to make a lot of money. They're going to get very sad, whatever it is, if they don't do the thing, because people are reluctant to do change. So you have to make sure that you lean into the kind of the ease of whatever it is you're doing and try and make it as, effortless as possible. So another consideration, how are people solving this now? I'll give you, a hard tech example. If you go to a doctor's office and it's very chilly, right? And you notice that at the nurse's station, they've put, or a hospital, at the nurse's station, they've put a bunch of, paper towels in the vents to stop airflow. And if you're selling me a product, right, that is a damper that helps prevent airflow in those specific stations so that the people working there can have a more comfortable work environment and save on energy and do all these things, I now believe you so much more because there's credibility, because they were providing your solution before you put your brand name on it. And that's amazing validation, you know, and that's a logical connection to actually what the solution and what the company and the product can look like. And then last but not least, a classic always, how financially viable is it? Are there dollars in this, right? Or is it just a scale play, right? Things can get big for a while and that's great, but unless there's money in it, unless there's viability in it, unless there's real logic and customer demand for it, you're going to run into some issues, because eventually you're going to run out of momentum just on fumes, and you're going to need to start fueling growth with cash, and you're going to need to start making some money. And investors are more reluctant than ever to throw money into black holes. They want to see how things are evolving, see that there's a plan, and really lean into it in a big way. So now let's talk about your market size. So the way that I think about market size, it's mostly research. And there's kind of three categories of research that I would encourage you to look at. There's kind of your good research, which is your online stuff, right? It's your reading industry reports, you know, the blogs, you know, the big media figures, you're subscribed on all the social media, you see that you've got, you know, 5,000 followers, or that people in this industry have 1 million followers, whatever it might be. And then last but not least is, you know, common understanding, meaning if I was to sell a startup that said, we cut waiting times in doctors' offices by 75%. I barely need to show anything before everybody gets excited, because we've all waited at a doctor's appointment 3 hours past our schedule, and we know that it's incredibly inefficient, right? So that common understanding is a good place to be as well. Now, better is kind of in the digital marketing realm. And digital marketing could basically be subbed in for minor validation or indirect validation, meaning if I post an ad and I get 10,000 clicks in 3 weeks, that's a really good sign. If I have a blog and I have 3,000 followers who are consistently reading it, that's a good sign, right? There's a lot of stuff that's free or relatively cheap. You know, you put $100 a week into social media, it hopefully shouldn't cripple the business, right? You can get some really good data, some charts, some engagement, some feedback, where you can start making decisions, not just broadly about the $1 billion, you know, automobile market, but about the 45,000 people in your geographic region that drive the cars that you need to target for your specific, you know, alternator adjuster, whatever it might be. You know, you want to make sure that you actually have some real data on what's happening there, so that you, in addition to the investor, but also just you, can feel comfortable that, hey, people want this, there's demand, there's interest, and I want to, you know, lean into that supply. Now, the best of the best is customer interviews. Why? Because of course it's got, you know, infinite value is the phrase that I think about. Meaning, if you use a customer well, you can learn from them, you could potentially get money from them, you could get relationships with them in their community, which could lead to more customers, you could get referrals from them, whether it's incentivized like a Robinhood, get some free stock, or it's just I'm going to send this to my email list because it's a charity startup and it makes me feel good. You know, whatever it is that gets you from 1 to 3 to 5 to, you know, 50,000, that's kind of the goal. And then last but not least, you can obviously get some really good focus groups that lead to investment, right? You can do some analysis on the work. You can understand how they're engaging with your product. And then maybe if you bump into the right customer, whether it's an individual or an entity, they might want to put some money in because they see the value that's there. And I can assure you this isn't pie in the sky. This has legitimately happened to a client within the last 6 months, that they had somebody put in a good amount of money to help them develop their product because there was a mutual alignment of interests, which is, you know, a great place to be. Next, you got your business model. So classic, how do you make money, right? You've got revenue streams. You've got a model for sustaining cash flow, for growing cash flow. Walk me through it. Show me that you're making money with ads, that you're making money with direct sales, that you're an e-commerce business that drives traffic and gets conversion, whatever it might be. From there, it's about, okay, you've got 5 channels. You're testing 3 of them. 2 of them are showing viability past their ROI and expense. Those are the 2 that we're going to lean into. We're going to expand into those, and we're going to try other ones, right? You want to see how you can test your market and see how you can test your model, because just because your product may work, but it may not work with your monetization schedule. So sometimes you need to think about, what's the best way that I can monetize this and actually lead to some value, not only for my customers, you know, to give the most painless monetization, but also to myself, so that way I can actually get, you know, the cash flow on the other side. Traction. So really kind of three big buckets of traction that I'm looking at. Your digital marketing, because it's very obvious, if you're doing digital marketing work or not. Your revenues, because of course it's great to show that you're gaining revenues, that you're getting traction, whatever it might be. And I do revenue / conversion, meaning show me that people care. I don't care if it's a click. I don't care if it's a survey, if it's revenues, if it's followers, blogs, comments. You have a responsibility to show the investor, I've done the work to show that people want this product. And that's why I'm coming to you. It's not that I have a dream that this could potentially be the next Apple. It's no, I've done the work, and that every person I talk to, it brings out their checkbook immediately and wants to buy the product. So I need your help to get this money to do the thing, right? It's about, the strength of the story. And then last but not least, retention and recommendation. So this is where the real money comes in, right? Revenues and conversion, that's great. You sell somebody on your website. But what's even better is the fact that you get some really loyal advocates, right? Some people that refer, some people that grow, some people that have brand, right? Think about it like this. This is using the extreme example, but when Apple first came out, people were proud to spend those, $2,000 on that MacBook Pro and show that bright glowing Apple, because it meant something. It meant class and interest, and, that you weren't just, some PC junkie or, some Bill Gates guy or Microsoft person. You were kind of more than that. That brand, perpetuated itself in the same way, whether it's the brand because of its aesthetic or it's the individuals because they love your service. You want something that drives the ball forward, right? Now, competition and competitive advantage. So really two sides to this. On the competition side, you have to find the most logical way to size up your competition. Now, I put the two most obvious ones on the left, which are, very typically used. Top left is a classic for example, we have a client that does at-home beauty, on-demand beauty at home, right? So for them, it's who focuses on in-home, who focuses at salon, and which ones are affordable and which ones are expensive. Now, the nice thing is, pretty much everybody doesn't fall in that top right quadrant. Basically, only they do. So that's a good way to show what they do. Now, in the same way, on the bottom left, if you look at it, you see feature A, feature B. There's us. There's, competitor A, competitor B, whatever. We've got all the features, or we've got all the best features, or whatever it might be. And we're allowing ourselves to, work with you at a reasonable price that delivers all the value under the sun, right? That's the pitch there with, the feature comparison. Now, on the right-hand side, and mind you, this isn't how you set it up graphically. This is more the points you want to get across. On the right-hand side, you've got basically your core competitive advantage questions you want to ask yourself. 1, founders. Are you the 1 in 10 people that can get this done? And mind you, this doesn't mean that you have the degree in engineering. This means there's 10 nuclear physicists that can get this done, and you happen to be one of the 10, right? That's a real competitive advantage. The market. Are you actually on brand, right? That's a good thing to be. It's not going to win you, over bonus points, but it's a good spot to be and a good spot to find yourself. Product. So for your product, the question is it a 10x improvement on the current solutions? Meaning, is it so good that it's going to push past the switching cost? Because switching cost is very high for most products. For acquisition, it's a question of, can you get momentum behind it that can beat your purchased growth, right? If you had to pay for every customer, you're going to run out of money. It's an untenable way to actually run your business. And in that regard, is there a way that growth can take over, that you can achieve success, that your customers can grow and expand organically on their own, allowing and driving business? It's very much to the effect of, and Y Combinator, they have a big thing of product market fit is not when, people like your product. It's when your only concern is keeping the lights on because your product is basically being taken from you, right? So many people want it so fast all the time, 24/7, that you're overwhelmed with demand, right? Now, mind you, there's everything under the sun in terms of scale as far as that goes, but it's an important kind of mindset to consider as you look towards, what acquisition can look like over a long period of time. And last but not least, monopoly. So as you get bigger, do you get harder to defeat? That's Amazon, right? Amazon, big, tall giant in the room, very hard to take them down along pretty much anything that they do. But that's a good thing for the investors of Amazon, right? Because if something gets too big, and its expenses get too high and it's too hard to manage and it's too hard to scale, and eventually you run out of customers, right? If you run into these big issues at scale or at, air quotes, monopoly size, then there's going to be some questions about how viable is this business holistically. So diving into your marketing plan, basics of a marketing plan. How are you finding, how are you engaging, and how are you closing and servicing, right? Locating, the big one is, are you your own customer, right? If you're not your own customer, there's a question of, and mind you, if you're solving cancer treatment drugs, right, you don't need to be someone who has cancer. You can be someone with a degree in the field. But to the effect of, if you're creating a community for e-gamer or for esports fanatics, right? If you don't know anything about esports and you don't play anything, it's a question of, are you the right person to, engage in this? Are you the right person to identify your customers, right? For engaging, it's, are you going to find them in the right way? This could be everything from direct sales, for getting warm introductions if it's very senior people. It could be engaging with the like a Reddit community if you wanted to. And it could also be that you have an aligned interest, meaning you find somebody who already has your customers and you give them some reason to care that you should have access, right? So someone's already sold your clients, partner with that person, offer them some upside, and see if you can't, shortcut your access threshold, right? Get to the customer all the quicker, all the more vetted. And then last but not least is closing and servicing. Just get the client, meaning customer first, revenue later. And what that means is, in the very, very beginning, you just need validation that people care about your product, right? And I know it sucks to not make money when you make a sale, but it's more about showing that there's value, less than there's the dollar, because sometimes people are a little bit suspicious of value. So it's understanding they don't want to throw money at it. But if they see there's value, that's why we have so many free trials, in every piece of software, because people are suspicious of value. They download it, they go, oh, okay, I see this works, I get it, I like it. And then they pay for the software, or, they don't, they just use the free version forever. But yeah, that's the idea, right? And then on the closing, the kind of the big part with closing and servicing is, what are you doing to, kind of going back a slide, what are you doing to drive that organic growth? How are you taking one customer and turning them into 5 customers by really utilizing them in a good way? Bringing them tons of value, encouraging them to refer their friends, encouraging them to monetize in other ways, different ways you can bring them into your circle and actually get them to care about what you're doing more than just giving you $50 for the thing, right? You want to incentivize them to have a growth mentality and an alignment. Your team, the basics that I always like to think about, are they qualified, are they competent, and are they committed? Meaning, are they qualified? Do they have the technical degrees, the certifications, the Forbes 30 under 30, whatever it might be, the YC investment, whatever it might be, that they have something that kind of shows that, okay, they're the right person for this type of work, or they're being, vetted, they have some sort of selection, right? Competent is, regardless of what their degree says, are they just good, right? I don't care if you have an electrical engineering degree, if you show me a robot that just works, right? If you're like, I built this in my garage, it cost me $4,000 and I put it together myself. It's like, it doesn't matter what your qualifications are then, it matters more about your competency, right? Because that's ultimately is, can what you do actually work? Now, commitment is always the other side of it, which is, you could have somebody really impressive, you could have somebody really competent, but unless they actually care enough to work on the project, to dedicate, a good amount of time, and this could be, first they start out as an advisor, then they start out, or they become a board member, or they're a co-founder with 20% equity, and they're dedicating 30 hours a week to your project, whatever it might be, that actually shows that the person you're working with on the team is both qualified, competent, and committed. Now, the big kind of highlight I want to throw here is, not one person needs to be this. This is the summation of the team, right? You need to actually be able to show, okay, listen, at a minimum, if I have 3 people on my team, one of us needs to be really committed to this and doing it every day. One of us needs to really know what's going on. And one of us has to be the right person to do this, because if not, put yourself in the investor's shoes. If your team isn't checking these boxes, why should they have faith in the business, right? And it's not to say you can't have a few missing pieces. Everybody's looking for different areas. Not every business is perfect, but it's about, are you knowledgeable about what you're missing? Are you looking for what you can change, how you can modify it, and how you can grow it over time, so that you meet the needs that you actually have to grow the business over time? Milestones and timeline. So this is, a basic timeline that, a number of clients have used, but walking kind of through it. Are you developing your idea? Have you done the validation work in your timeline, right? Are you showing that it's growing? Like, are you acquiring a team? Are you building and scaling? Are you raising money, or have you put in your own $50,000 or $100,000, whatever it might be that's relevant? Are you accomplishing goals? You're like, hey, we want 10,000 clicks by December. Like, show me that you set that goal, you achieved it by 4,000, by, an extra 4,000, and now you're setting even bigger goals, right? And then I put this one in orange to draw it out because it's different. It's not historical, it's future looking. It's what are your plans, right? Everywhere across every slide, you basically have 3 timelines. You have what you've done, what you're doing, and what you're going to do. It's your team, right? It's what your team look like, what your team currently looks like, what your team needs. It's your revenue, what your revenue used to be, what your revenue currently is, and your plans for expansion, right? You should have 3 timelines in mind for basically every slide. This is just one that focuses specifically on the timeline of your business, right? Because it's your business did some stuff, right? Now you're showing what your business is currently doing, right? You're in this investing and raising money portion, right? And then in the future, you have plans for this development, this sales team, this acquisition, whatever it might be that shows that there's something going forward. Next, you have your capital ask. So the big thing for capital ask and use of proceeds is knowing where you are in the cycle, right? If you're an early stage founder and there's one person on your team, you have to be putting in some of your own money. There's just kind of no way to get around it unless you have no money, in which case the question is, do you have the money to actually get this thing started? Like, do you need to have a part-time job, a full-time job, work on this on the side, whatever it might be? Are you in a position where you can actually get this thing off the ground? Because it's very difficult when a startup operates from scarcity. And right, and I know every startup is basically operating from scarcity because, your company's not Microsoft. But if you're operating from too much scarcity, right, there's a difference between not having an Xbox and not having food and water. Now, you need the food and water of startup world in order to actually make smart decisions, which lead to you making the money to buy the Xbox, right? So in this way, have you put in the money yourself? Have you asked your friends for money? You know what I mean? Have you gotten loans or investment? And the point there is, are you willing to ruin the holiday season because of how much you believe in your idea, right? Are you willing to risk it? Because if you're willing to risk your money and your mom's money and your best friend's money, okay, I see that you really believe in this. You believe in this to the tune of 150,000. I'm interested. I'm already curious because you're willing to put some money in. Let's see what you got, right? Now, as you move more towards the right side of the page of, later stage, this is kind of, we have a fixed amount of money that we know we need. We're really trying to grow. We're really trying to scale. Or, if you start getting into the early M&As and IPOs, that's we have definite capital need, or we're looking to exit, whatever it might be that your scenario is, but you're trying to actually get something done with that capital very specifically. Whereas early stage, it's much more, I'm trying to build, I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to accomplish, X goal or X milestone. Now on the bottom, I basically put the best and worst of, 2 different use of proceeds slides that I've seen, or sections. Version A is something I see, far too often, which I would definitely encourage nobody does, where they go, oh yeah, our salaries are 48% and we're using some money for other, we're raising some little extra money and then we're going to start our marketing campaigns. It's like, okay, there's like infinite red flags there, right? Because salaries, why are you paying yourself more than you're actually spending in marketing? Other, I don't know what that means. So that just tells me that I'm buying you, McDonald's. And marketing, investors don't like launching marketing campaigns with their dollars. They like expanding marketing campaigns with their dollars. And the fact that social media and Instagram is free basically means you can launch a marketing campaign for close to $0. And in which case, after you do that, you show some sort of results, right? You show some engagement. Now you're not launching a campaign, you're growing a campaign, you're scaling a campaign, you're refining it. There's reason and logic. And all of a sudden I go, okay, you only got 20 conversions there, but I understand you're working with a very limited budget. That's still very impressive that you did that with only a few $100s a month. I bet you with another 5,000, a really good marketing team, I bet you there's some more stuff that can take place. On the right side, this excites me because I go, okay, they're expanding their sales team. So that means they already have a sales team, which means they probably already have sales. So I'm getting sold by that one line in the pie chart, right? New feature development. Okay, so that means they have old features and they're adding more stuff. So it's not like I'm putting money in to get the first, 4 features built, which is always a great feeling. I know there's something existing. Office operations, okay, they have an office, they have to spend money on telephones and internet, fine, fair enough. And legal, okay, I see that they haven't avoided legal because there's always legal expenses because you're running a business, so it's kind of status quo. But also, it's contractual stuff. I imagine they're a B2B business, they're always doing a lot of contract work, so they basically have a general counsel on retainer that allows them to tackle all their needs and wants. You can clearly see, right, which one makes you more excited, which one gives you greater certainty, which one gives you more comfort that not only is this person happy to take my money, but I know where they're going to spend it. I know that they've thought through it. I know that they value it. Like, are you going to use my dollar and care for it as well as you would use your own, right? That's you're talking to investors, right? And they're these, big ivory tower giants who have all the money in the world, but they're just people. It's just Susan and just Tim and just, Bob or whoever it might be. They're just people that happen to be in charge of a lot of money. And if you can relate to them and you can show that you respect their work and you show that you actually understand the field that you're playing in, or at least have the partners that can help you, do the right things with your advisors and your board of directors and your marketing teams and whatever, you can get so much further just by doing, those 10 hours extra of work to actually prepare to go on the field versus just walking out cold, right? And I think this is actually the last one. Yeah. So the financials. So I'll spend a quick minute on this. So when you're building your financials, I could go through a whole presentation, and Mike, I will probably do that as a separate one. We'll do like building your financial model 101, and I'll, crack open Excel. It'll be great. But I'll give you some best practices. That way you at least have something to, go home with. So this is the minimum what you need. You need a cover page. Why? Because it's fancy. And fancy looks professional, and professional looks expensive, and expensive gets you more money, right? We're practical here, right? We're not trying to be anything more than we're not. We're just trying to do good business and be professional along the way, right? Your assumption page. Is your model easy to manipulate, right? I should be able to sit down with you and go, all right, let's change our percentage of growth in year 2 to 5%. You should be able to do that very quickly, because what if you're in the meeting with the investor and they go, I think you guys are really underassuming, your growth a little bit. I bet you that's 15%. You want to be able to show that and see their eyes light up. You don't want to go, okay, give me a week and we're going to do some Google, and we've got this kid from FIU, or any, school, Arizona State University, who's going to tinker with our Excel for a while and we'll send it back. Like, that's not the message you want to send, right? You want easy, functional. Projection output. This is your revenues and your expenses. I want to see it. Think of it like an income statement, but not exactly. And the reason that I say not exactly is because this isn't accounting, right? This is much more investment banker, much less CPA. Because the bankers, right, which is my background, and the way that kind of the financial people, the venture capital, private equity, these types of, big finance people look at it, they know that numbers are soft, meaning I don't care if you're paying $27,000 in tax or $35,000 in tax, right? I care that it's accurate and that you pay your tax, but that doesn't move your valuation. I need to know what the core revenues are, what the core expenses are, what the core margins are, so that I can form an opinion about your business. I can understand it, I can analyze it, I can compare it, right? And of course, lots of things, fall into different categories and get bucketed, but you need a way to kind of take all the data and put it in one uniform way to analyze. And that's where this kind of projection output of revenue and expenses comes through. And the reason I spend a minute on it is because, remember, you're not looking at it like it's an income statement. You're looking at it like it's an assumption of the longevity of your business, right? And the last two are revenue and expense build. Of course, have them separate. You should be able to have them separate. I should be able to go down them and understand. And then supporting data. If you're telling me that your industry average salaries are 47,000 and that's why you're using it, it would be great if you had that link in there. It would be great if you showed me that data set. It would be great if all that's in there, because the more you add, and it's not that you want to make your Google Sheets, 80 tabs, but the more that you add to show that, you're a professional, that you have the actual data to back it up, that you're not wasting anybody's time. It's not I feel like it's 40%. It's like, feelings are great, but feelings don't, write checks. And these investors are going to want to see that there's something there, even if it's just you putting in the effort to footnote something. Now, the best practices, and these are kind of basically true for the whole and every page, every example, but they're especially true in the model. make this, both the presentation and your model, as simple as possible, comma, but as complex as necessary, right? It's the old Einstein quote of things should be as simple as they can be and no simpler. So, if you need to use the word biopharmaceutical, that's fine. But make sure that if the audience you're talking to are not wearing lab coats, maybe you should define it as well to make people educated in the conversation and know how to use it and become empowered and treat the investor with respect, right? You're educating them, you're showing them. It's kind of the mentality, and this is like from, I'm sure people have heard this like from college and whatnot. A test isn't a chance to fail. It's an opportunity to show what you know, right? Same thing with an interview, same thing with your pitch. You're not going in there asking for money. You're going in there saying, this is what I'm doing. And I would love it if you would partner with me on this. And if you won't, I completely understand. You got a lot of things going on, but I'm building this. This isn't a question. It's not a conversation. It's not a what if. I'm doing this. I would love for you to join. And if you can, I'm going to show you all the reasons why. That's a different message than I need $30,000 or my business collapses tomorrow. And here's the thing. Both of those things can be true. Just frame it like the first so that you actually stand the chance of surviving, of growing, of building your company, because I love it when good companies get built. And that's what you need, that polish to actually get it done more often than not. Can you read it? Now, I take this literally. That's why I write these presentations like I do. I want people, whether I'm in the room or not, to be able to understand and get value, right? In the same way, when I open up a financial model, if I look at your revenue tab and it links to 18 different things and all these different sheets, it's like, that can be accurate, yeah. But if I have to have half an aneurysm to understand how you have cash flow, that's not the message you want. You want something that I can go down and just go, oh, I see how their business works. I see the nuts and bolts and how it builds to the engine. And now I understand why this thing works really well. And that's exciting, right? Same story on the expenses. I want to be able to read it. I want to see, okay, this is how you think about salaries and growth rates and operational expenses and cost of goods sold. Like, it reads and pieces together. Defendable assumptions. So the phrase that pays, and my team laughs because I'm like a broken record. You give the same advice so many times. It's, we can put anything on the page, anything on any page, any pitch deck. You can say it's $1 trillion growth rate tomorrow. But you know what? You have to show me the facts. You have to be able to defend it, because I want you to put the absolute most ridiculous thing on that page that you can defend. If your growth is 80% week on week, it's going on that page, but you better believe we're going to have a page immediately following that shows every sale to show that 80% is actually valid, because you want to show the investor that not only are you being aggressive, meaning you're trying to, achieve and grow and scale and do all these things very quickly, but that you're doing it properly, right? How many businesses have collapsed and, death by sales because they ran towards the finish and they never picked up water along the way, right? They didn't actually stop to defend things and make sure things were secure and actually able to be defensible when you got to the end. So it's really important when you look at your growth rates. If you go, we're going to grow at 5%. What does the industry grow at? If the industry doesn't grow at 5% and you're saying you are, okay, you're going to beat the industry. Why? That's a question that an investor might ask. And if you don't know those numbers, right, then you're going to look a little bit silly saying that you're, the someone very knowledgeable in fashion, and you don't know what the demand has gone up, in your state in the last year, if that's, your area of expertise. And then last but not least, your industry and hiring norms. And this is basically your norms everywhere, meaning I should know what consultants on average charge, right? I should know how big markets are. You should know, if you're a healthcare company, what the average margin is for SaaS businesses. If you're a SaaS compliance business, okay, you have healthcare, you have compliance, and you have SaaS in there. Those are 3 industries that you need to know all the basics about, because you can't afford ignorance, right? Investors don't like we didn't know. It's like, here's the worst case scenario. An investor brings up competition that does exactly what you do that you didn't know about, right? You can imagine how awkward that would be if they throw some, have you heard of Quibu? And you're like, what the hell is Quibu? And they're like, yeah, they do exactly what you do. You might want to give them a Google. And it's like, that is painful for all parties involved. Now you can imagine that's on every page. If you don't take the time to, analyze and think it through and understand, you're going to find yourself in awkward situations that 5 minutes, of Googling could have prepared you for. So I threw a lot. I got my time 1:45. I'm pretty pleased with it. I was running, so forgive me on that. Here's my contact details. If anybody has questions, I'm pretty easy to reach and connect with. So hopefully it was helpful, and we'll definitely do this again.
Holy cow. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Running.
First of all, we're more than welcome to go over 1 o'clock as well, as long as you're available. But that was jam packed, full of information. I hope I'm going to need to rewatch this several times myself. But you know what's interesting about this session? It was more than just the pitch deck. This is you presenting to the investor your entire business plan almost. I mean, this is going in depth, deep into the necessities that you need to get that investment, to get that check. So thank you, Aaron. That was unbelievable. I'm going to go ahead, before I ask you my questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to the group. Audience, what are your questions for Aaron? Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask.
Question, Aaron.
Hello,
so how are you doing?
Lovely. How are you?
I'm good. So do you guys help with like pricing strategies, or like who do you, yes, or I'll just contact you. I'll reach out to you.
For sure. All that type of stuff. And, let me turn that into a question so it's helpful as well. We'll do that. So if you look at like a common theme for pricing, nobody really knows what they're doing with pricing, because pricing, definitionally isn't set by you. It's set by what someone is willing to pay. And what that means is, don't be scared to change your pricing. If I had to give, one little piece of advice, because the first 50 customers are not going to make your business. The first 5,000 customers probably won't make your business. So don't be scared to make mistakes and learn along the way, to change your expenses, to change your features, to change your name. You know what I mean? But especially on the revenue, because no one's going to be mad that you're maturing in your business. Microsoft charges 5 different prices for Office and nobody complains, right? You have to just figure out what the method is that works the most, utilize it, and grow from there.
To mention something on that, Aaron, I have heard though that it's easier to go down in price versus go up. Have you seen that to be true as well?
Yes. And the thing, there's a whole bunch of thoughts that I have on that, because you're arguing against yourself, right? It's like in a bidding war, the losers are never the consumer. It's always the businesses, because they're just fighting down to zero margin. That's all that is. Because if I keep lowering my prices, if I see a business and they lower their prices, I think 2 things. Either A, their margins are hurting, or B, they have figured out a new way to monetize, which means that they can lower this threshold to get more people in to monetize more on the back end. That's my automatic, assumption. And I know I won't know number 2, because I don't know how they're going to make that money. It could be data, it could be software, like access to their people, whatever. But I find it's better to argue for value versus try and argue for price. Meaning, if I'll give you an example. One of our clients that we work with, they do basically dispatch software, but for home healthcare businesses, right? So you have caregivers that need to go to a place, and they need to, bring a woman her groceries, or helps an old man with his medication, whatever it might be. Well, if they are mathematically saving these businesses and can prove it out, $30,000, they shouldn't charge $50 a month, right? For me, if I'm the investor, that just shows, an ill-equipped businessman. If I look at that, because I go, you should at least be making half, right? Because if you're saving them $15,000, why shouldn't you at least get what you're saving them if they're getting it already? Like, it already kind of brings those conversations. So if you're arguing down, my question would be, what can you argue the value is, or can you reposition how you're framing what your pricing is in order to, drive better value for you and your customer?
Great answer. What other questions do you have for Aaron?
And everyone, Aaron. If people are shy, they can always send me a message as well. What's going on? I appreciate it.
So going back to market size, I'm a part of an app that kind of falls under an umbrella of several different markets.
Yeah.
So whenever you are calculating the total addressable market, do you include everything that your business model is applicable to, or do you keep that separate? Does that make sense?
It does. So it's one of those things where you kind of need to figure out what your primary and secondary umbrellas are, right? Because if I use just an example of a racing iPhone game, right? I could use people that have cell phones. I could use people that download games or apps, people that download games, people that play racing games. You know, you can kind of go down the funnel. And I think you should try and be as apples to apples as you can, meaning, you know, if you have a healthcare app, try and compare and size healthcare applications. You know, it's the whole keep it as simple and rational as it can. Ideally, you're not saying, oh yeah, we have a sports betting app and we're going to compare it to, you know, the size of fantasy football betting worldwide. It's like, okay, well, there's a difference in, you know, scale, and maybe that's more apples and, you know, cinder blocks, not apples and oranges. So try and find, you know, that rationale within it. But the nice thing is it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be defendable. Meaning if somebody said, this looks a little bit off, why are you comparing that? You should feel comfortable saying, oh, we did it because of A, B, and C. You know, we will love your feedback and thoughts. I mean, we're always looking to refine our, like, that's an engaging, rational, you know, competent business person, not someone who just goes like, oh, we thought apps were good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Great question, Clint. Anyone else? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions.
I always find with these webinars, and the reason that I throw so much stuff at it is because everybody's attended those make $5 million on YouTube, blah, blah, blah. And where they give you like 4 secrets, and their secrets are all them selling their own course. And I just can't. I can't with that. So for me, I'm always just like, I got to scream value at people.
100%. No, and I appreciate all the value provided. And like I said, this is much more than just a pitch deck class that we just had. So I appreciate that. You know, what's funny too is though, when it comes to a pitch deck, he's got some great examples in here going unsaid. He's keeping a low word count. He's got visuals. It's the length of his presentation for the amount of time he had was pretty spot on. My question, Aaron, is, you know, I saw a startup recently that had a 1-minute presentation, a 3-minute, a 5-minute, a 10-minute, a 15-minute, a 30-minute, and an hour presentation. Out of all this information, obviously you've got to, you know, pick and choose sometimes what's most important for that time frame. But was that guy over prepared, or was he pretty spot on?
I think he's over prepared. I'm going to give you my little secret for how I prepare pitches. And the nice thing is, for example, I could give this exact same thing over a 4-hour period, or I could give it in a 5-minute period. And the reason is this. The secret to a good pitch is not memorizing every word, but it's knowing what you're trying to say. So I know that my pitch, the shortest it can ever be is, you know, this one-liner, which is about 5 seconds, right? And this is scripted. I know exactly what this is every single time. You know, it's this early stage startup business. We focus on this, you know, you get it, where it's exciting. But beyond that, every slide, and it's an old mock trial tip from high school, but it works well. The idea was when lawyers go up, they can't memorize every question they want to ask a defendant, right? So what do? They need to memorize either keywords that let them know what the point is they're trying to get across, or key phrases which they're trying to get the person to say. And once they get them to say it, then they kind of move on. In the same way, if I know the point of every slide, and I know what my minimum slides are, which the least you should have, you know, is either A, the one-liner, or B, the problem solution and probably your traction, you know, showing, hey, we know it, we solved it, and we're doing some things with it. After that, the nice thing is it's plug and play, which means if I have a 5-minute pitch, I just go, okay, well, I'm only going to talk about the 3 most important things for a couple seconds. And if I have an hour pitch, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go over everything kind of quickly, you know, for 3 or 4 minutes. And if I have a 5-hour thing, I know I'm just going to lean into every topic as hard as I can and just sequentially work my way down. So if you build the framework of the business, you know, you can make it as complex, you know, as high or low resolution as you want at will. And I think the thing that it does more than anything, it's not about making it easier for yourself as much. It's about making it more conversational. And one of the easiest ways to disconnect from an investor is to start reading a script. And it doesn't matter if that script is on paper or it's in your mind, because people will do the thing where they go and they look in the right corner, or they look down because they're trying to remember the words. And it's so awkward. Instead of you just saying, if you're a liquor distiller, bourbon distiller, just say that. Just talk about the thing that you know. It's the thing you know, right? So just phrase it in the way that's conversational and normal to you. The way I like to think about it, in my kind of general mentality, I pitch as if I'm talking to like an interested uncle, like someone who knows me kind of, who likes me kind of, and is willing to hear what I have to say, but I can't waste their time either, right? I kind of have to, I'm going to their house, you know, I'm going to ask a few things and I'm asking for 50K. Okay, how much pleasantries? Like that's kind of the mentality that I typically go for, because I want to be conversational and, you know, fun and fluid, because that's easier to talk to for, you know, hours and hours. But I also don't want to go off the deep end and forget what I'm supposed to say or be unprofessional or any of these sort of things. So hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, that was so spot on. And, you know, you're humanizing the person you're talking to. You know, they're, by what you said about the script was so spot on. If you are worried about memorization, you're adding unnecessary stress on yourself, versus just knowing your talking points and having a good conversation with the investor. That's a group spot on, Aaron. I appreciate that answer.
Of course.
What other questions do we have for Aaron?
Hey, Aaron, I've got one for you. So we, you know, those of us who get through this are kind of, it's instilled in us to make sure that we've got, you know, sort of that hockey stick, right, at year 3 or year 5. You know, we can talk about, say, hey, the average, you know, growth rate in this industry is 5%, so that justifies that. What are some of those like second level questions that an investor is going to ask to justify, say, like a jump from $9 million to $26 million between years 4 and 5?
I think when you're looking at stuff like that, because if you're going from, you know, 9 to 30, there's a question. Are you making any unrealistic expectations? That's my first question, right? Are you assuming that from some reason from year 4 to 5, you go from 10% conversion to 40% conversion, right? Because if that's happening, then my question is, okay, why are you assuming this? You know, what assumptions in my natural question would be, what assumptions in your model are leading to this? Show me, you know, the formulas and the areas between, because I am banker, so I immediately will go to the model and just show me. And if it makes sense, I totally love it and I believe it and I'm all for it. But if it doesn't, I'm going to wonder, you know, why you didn't validate this a little bit sooner, and why you didn't do the eye test, right? Where if you see my revenues going from 9 to 40, it's like, okay, the investor's going to see that too. Does that make sense? Now, mind you, there's no issue showing big numbers, but it's kind of goes back to the point I was saying before, where it just needs to be defendable, right? If you see that, I'll give you an example. There's a client that we worked with that had a very aggressive view on how they were going to build their market size. And it was going to be on average about 4 times faster than their biggest competitors. And I mean, billion-dollar companies, right? So my immediate question to them was, are you 4 times better than them? Right? That's a big one. And that's, you know, they had to kind of go, well, I mean, probably not today. So, okay, well, then maybe we should be a little bit more reasonable with what we're assuming, because if someone hasn't done it before us, we're going to be, you know, treading new ground in terms of, you know, these growth rates. Maybe it's better we at least fall in the, you know, aggressive historical example. But beyond that, if you have a good reason for why your revenue is growing and why those changes have taken place, part of me says leave some bait, you know, show that you have a 50% increase, you know, year on year, or a decrease, or whatever the impressive number it is that, you know, drives that growth. But also make sure you have the data to, you know, back it up, because you don't want to, you know, make a claim that, you know, your Excel sheet can't cash.
That's a good way to put it. Thank you.
Of course.
Any last questions for Aaron?
I have a question. I wanted to know, how do you all determine if a company is ready to present their presentations or their pitch decks to investors, or more specifically, if they actually need investment? Is that something that you all look at through their business plan and identify if they actually need to utilize VC capital to be able to scale, or is that something that you all do personally?
Yes. So that's something that we would do, via a budget, because one of the first things that we do is we go, like in our business, for example, my way of it is, one, give me the basic, what do you provide, to whom, for what, at what price, give me the basics that I could write your business and explain it to somebody, elsewhere.
Mhm.
The next thing I do is open an Excel sheet and go, okay, now we're going to take all the revenues and expenses that you can think of, and we're going to math it, and we're going to see, do you actually need money? Because if, and this is an encouragement to everybody on the phone, if you can avoid raising money, I encourage you to, because equity is also what is called infinitely expensive, meaning you have 100% of it, and then the second you give a percent away, all of a sudden you don't.
Mhm.
And now that person, if you ever want it back, they have the right to ask for as much as you're willing to pay, right? And if you infinitely want it back, then they can write $1 million price tag on it and you have to sell it, right? Or you have to buy it from them.
Right.
If you can avoid equity, I definitely would encourage it. Loans, whether it's friends and family or even financially, if you can do it, depending on what kind of stage you're in. But that being said, it's not bad to use equity. It's not bad to raise capital. You just go into it open-minded, right? Because a common question I ask all my clients, especially those that are post-revenue, they go, Aaron, we want to raise money in 6 months. And I go, okay, what has the bank offered you? They go, what do you mean? I'm like, well, why wouldn't you start with the bank, right? Because I would rather pay $200,000 in interest for $100,000 in cash if it means I get to keep 25% more of the business that I, supposedly believe in. So if you can start there and at least have the numbers in mind, right? Just part of doing your diligence. Okay, I know the bank's going to offer me X, Y, and Z%, and that's a nightmare, or that's untenable for me, or I'd have to, put it against my house and I'm not comfortable. All of those are very valid reasons. And then you go to the investor, and when they say, why are you raising money from me? You say, listen, I did the work, I did the research. A, it seems like you'd be a great partner. And B, I understand that this business works best if it has X amount of capital. Like, it gives you an opportunity to present and engage and show expertise versus just go, oh, I want money, but I don't know if I need it. The phrase that pays is for us is, you are not raising capital, you are planning for expenses. Because raising capital is never the goal. It's always, I want to spend 5K next month. Well, shit, I don't have the money. So what do I do? Okay, well, I need money. Okay, how long do I expect to spend 5K? For 12 months? Okay, that's 60K of demand that I automatically have. I do that for all my line items. I understand that I've probably made about a 10 to 20% margin of error because things are always more expensive than they seem. I boost that up, round it out, see what that number looks like. And then I go, okay, I need $150,000. I need 100 grand. Let's just make life easy. If I was to sell 100 grand for 10%, that means that my company's worth pre-money $1 million, right? And post-money 1.1. How do I feel about that, right? Because valuation is one of those unfortunate startup things where it's based off two things, your gut and precedents. Now, the issue with precedents are when markets are changing, precedents kind of go out the window because people want to use them. Investors want to argue you down and you want to argue up, and whoever's right is whoever says yes, right? But what you can do is you can make good arguments and say, hey, we expect X, Y, and Z. This is a valuation I'm willing to accept. I would raise $100,000 and give up 10% of my business. Okay, you know what? $1 million is where we will start, right? And to kind of quickly address the other part of your question, which was, how do you know if you're ready to present? It's all about your audience, because if you're pitching to people that are investing in you, you don't need any slides. Right. All you need is you to go there, say the things, and ask them for money. Because remember, you could tell them you're making a lemonade stand or the cure for cancer, but they are believing in you. Therefore, it's just a question of you going, hey, I need this. Do you believe in me? I could really use it. This is my goal. This is what we're doing. Like, you don't need any slides. If you move further and further down this chain, closer, especially to the seed round where you're talking to either, distant contacts or small angels or whatever, remember that they're a stranger, right? And they're making not an investment in you, an investment in a business. And a business has diligence, a business has financials and a business plan. So people think that you kind of need to do one or the other, but depending on who you're talking to, if they're going to invest in you, you can get away with very little. But if they're going to invest in the business, you have to be incrementally, more prepared as you go down the list of friends and family and then Series A to have more people that are doing your diligence and more diligence and more to prove, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I really like just to create the deck because it answers a lot of unknown questions, you know what I mean? Or the questions that you may not even know that you have, you know, or that you've not addressed. I know you're going right back to that slide. If I have a million of these, I have a trillion of these because it's like in a rubric and I like playing in it because that value proposition is the most important thing. It's your what? What are you doing? What's your value? Why would I invest in you? Why are you important to me? And so I love this idea. So maybe not even put the whole deck together, but really flesh this out to really talk about that problem, solution, and value a little bit more. So thank you for that.
I totally agree. The business model canvas, for all its faults and buckets, what it allows you to do is structure thought, right?
Yeah.
Because the nice thing for me is just because of my background, I can analyze a business cold. I will go through all the checks in my head to understand if this thing passes all my mentality, all my questions. A lot of people don't come from that world. That's fine. So use a framework, have it, use the crutch so that way you can, walk the distance, put the partners, put the value prop, understand what's going on. Most startups are about 50% behind where they could be if they only put in the effort to make things a little bit more efficient for themselves, right? And do a little bit of Googling. Because the nice thing about starting a startup, especially now, I would argue that there are basically infinite resources. Like everybody wants you to own your own business and grow and expand and succeed. What are you doing to further that yourself is ultimately the question.
It's a big question. Yeah, awesome. I definitely have your contact information. So if you can analyze like that, I would love to hear it. As we all would. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Great question and great answer. It's funny you asked that question too, because I like to bring up Gary Vee every once in a while, but he always talks about how we like to celebrate us fundraising, but I'd much rather celebrate 5 million in revenue than 5 million raised. Right?
Absolutely.
You're giving away a part of your company. And if you don't have to, don't do it. And you also have to think about, if you are going to take on institutional capital, you have to understand what that means. You are going to have to look for an exit point, some sort of liquidation event. So you have to understand that that's going to happen at the end of the day too, and your investor is going to push for it. But that's about our time for today. Aaron, I'm going to hit pause or stop on this recording. What a wonderful session.